Hey guys, this is Angela. Welcome to my channel. Some of you may know that I graduated from Sheridan Animation back in 2014. So I have about 28 books here that I bought while I was at the Sheridan Animation program. Through a rough calculation, I realized more than a quarter of my living expenses were spent on books, especially if you didn't draw for your entire life and you're suddenly in this very intensive animation program. You do get the sense that the more books you buy, the better your art will get. But looking back, a lot of the books I didn't even end up reading, and a lot of them I don't find that useful after I graduated. So without further ado, let me just introduce you to all the books I have here. So the first section I have here, they're all books very specific for the animation program. So I have some animation book specifically for animating, either for character animation, special effects animation, or just animal animation. Life drawing books, some anatomy books. The second section I have here are more specific to environment design. Some of you may know I worked in the animation industry for 6 years as a background painter, environment designer. I kind of chose that path very specifically even back in school. So I have quite a few that I want to recommend to you guys. Third section here are basically all art of books. Art of books from Pixar, DreamWorks, Disney, and Laika. They're very inspiring to look at. I really enjoy looking at some of the early development stuff that's even not included in the movie. It's very inspiring to see. So the final section here are books basically not really specific for the animation industry. They are either children's book illustration, fashion illustration. I remember back in school, one of the teachers told us, try to look for inspiration outside of your own field. So for us, outside of animation, try looking into photography, illustration, modern art, architecture, all sorts of different influences. Look outside of your little box and just learn from other masters in other fields. Let me just talk you guys through all the books I have here, because I do think the ones I have here are pretty good. For life drawing, this book here, Force, is very specific for animation style life drawing. The difference between animation life drawing and illustration life drawing and life drawing for fine art is that we want to capture motion and we want to capture the movement of the character. So it's not just about capturing the fine detail of the human body. We do a lot of short poses, 5-second, 10-second poses. So I think this book is probably the best book for animation life drawing. If you're preparing for your portfolio, definitely check out this book. So aside from gestural drawing, as an animator or character designer, we also need to learn human anatomy. So in the first year of our program, and one of the courses is life drawing. So in the second semester, we had to memorize every bone and every muscle of the human body, and we had to do quite a few really complicated tests. So this book was probably the most helpful book for me for memorizing those terms. When you look at the cover, you would think it's just like photos of naked body, but no, it's all text. It explains in great detail different muscles of the human body and how it connects to the bone. So all of this stuff will be tested in the first year of your animation program. Sheridan specifically, I don't know about other schools. So yeah, invest into one of these. So especially if you are interested in character design or animating human characters. So here are 3 books very specific to just animating. The first one, Richard Williams' The Animators Survival Kit. I think everyone probably heard of this one. The first year animation classes, animation principle classes covers a lot of these knowledge. It would be helpful if you kind of go through them before you join the program, just to prepare yourself, or if you're completing your assignments during your classes, it's good to reference this book to make sure you're getting the principles right. I definitely referenced this book the most during the first year of the program. So the second book is also very useful for the first year of the animation program because it covers special effects animation. It's called Elemental Magic, so it covers different elements and how you animate them. I would recommend this if you are interested in special effects animation. So this one is called Cartoon Animation. It's really good reference if you are in first year of school and you don't really know much about the Western animation style. I had to reference this book a lot because I was more familiar with the Japanese style. So yeah, these three books, I would say, if you are interested in animating, they are immensely helpful. So I do have two books on animals as well. During school, we had field trips out to the zoo and Royal Winter Fair in Toronto, where we get to draw some farm animals. So these books were really helpful in completing those drawing trips and assignments. Yeah, I think they are good if you are also preparing for your portfolio and you want to include a few animal drawings. Okay, so the second section, let's just go over them as well. I did fall asleep a lot during animation history lectures, so I'm not the most fluent in animation history. I'm just going to talk about these books based on the content I read in these books and give you guys a brief introduction. The Noble Approach. I don't really know a lot of people outside of animation who know this designer, Maurice Noble. He is famous for designing sets and environments for Looney Tune animation. He worked on Bugs Bunny, Roadrunner. Majority of people, when they hear those cartoons, they think, oh, it's just like a cartoon. They don't really relate cartoons to art and fine art. But I would say his designs, they shouldn't be overlooked just as cartoon backgrounds. He's very wise about what design is, what originality is. So this book is not just a guide on how to design a good layout and a good environment. It's more about how you can find your original style, how you can become a good designer in animation. He has a lot of really good insights into the animation industry, and I remember reading this book and I was just like highlighting every second line he wrote because there's just so much I related to. I just want to read a few quotes that I highlighted in this book to kind of explain to you guys how he inspired me as well. Challenge yourself by making a location you may have seen millions of times different and special. He's always about trying to encourage us to bring our unique voices into the animation world. Here's a really good one. No amount of gray color or paint technique will improve a lousy composition. This really hit home. Like for me, back in school, I remember trying to improve my really lousy layout and composition with just fancy color and lighting. And it wasn't until much later that I realized I needed to go back and improve my perspective, my composition, my basic drawing skills before trying to make something look good with adding glow or adding like some kind of cast shadow that looks cool in other people's painting. This book is just full of golden quotes. I would recommend any designer to check out this book if you are interested in developing your own original style. He talks a lot about originality, why it's not good to catch the trend and whatever is popular. Okay, so I've been talking for 20 minutes already. I'm not gonna do every single book. I'm just going to pick out my favorites from this point on. So Dream World is written by Hans Bacher. He is a veteran designer who worked at Disney. He worked on various films like Hercules, Mulan, what else? Lilo and Stitch, Beauty and the Beast. His style is very simplistic yet striking, and I love his stuff he did on Mulan. I'm just gonna quickly show you guys. He was working for Steven Spielberg at the time. So Steven Spielberg had an animation studio called Amblimation. I've never heard of it. His friend from Disney asked Hans if you want to come over to Disney and work on this project called Mulan, and he was immediately intrigued. And it was not until a bit later did the director invite him to become the production designer on Mulan. It was because the director saw all these amazing sketches he did. The first thing he realized while on Mulan is that he didn't want this movie to look like another Disney movie. he wanted to make sure he got the Chinese influence right. He wanted to make sure he did it properly. So he looked into Chinese fine art. He had a Chinese designer friend working at Disney that showed him a whole bunch of Chinese paintings and Chinese comics. So he got a lot of influence from that. And the two key things he summarized from Chinese art is that there's very limited perspective, almost no perspective, and there isn't too much focus on detail. Chinese painters tend to focus on establishing the mood of the landscape instead of refining every tree branches. I think he captured Chinese art, 国画, very well. All the colors are very beautiful too. So in this book, he will talk a lot about how to simplify composition. This project actually influenced his style because he realized it's all about simplifying the shapes and making everything read as well as you can for the audience. This one is highly recommended. Let's briefly talk about my favorite artist in animation, Blair. I think she completely revolutionized concept art, and many artists today is still heavily influenced by her. You will see her style not only in those art of books, but also in children's book illustrator and editorial illustration. Her style, I think, just combines really masterful use of color and composition with a very childlike, innocent style. I just love it. She was the production designer on Alice in Wonderland and various other projects at Disney. She also helped to design attraction in Disney World. I think if you are a children's book illustrator, she's also a great influence to look into. So the last one from this second section is this book called Framed Ink. I want to talk more about this book in detail in my coming video because I do want to do a video on composition, and this is probably the best book on composition, not just for drawing but for film, for animation. He breaks down different camera angles and explains how to place the character in different settings. It's just a really great book if you want to brush up on your composition skills. And it's all in black and white, so he's not relying on color, he's just completely using his crazy skills. Really recommend it. It's really good for comic artists as well. So the third section of all the art of books, I don't really want to go into detail because a lot of these concept artists do post their drawings online, so you don't necessarily have to buy these art of books. You can find a lot of concept art just on their Tumblr or Blogspot. Do people even use Blogspot? But there's one that I want to talk about is this one. This one is the ultimate art of book, the Art of Pixar. Starting from Toy Story, it's just like they have so many masterpieces, and for every one of these masterpieces, they create something called a color script. So if you are not familiar with animation terms, you might not know this. A color script is when you grab the main frame from each sequence, you collect all of those composition and layout. In chronological order, you place them into these strips. The reason why they do color script is because, as I mentioned in my 12 principles of color, color evokes different emotions, and it's very important for a filmmaker to understand what color are evoking what emotion in the audience mind. I think Pixar is the first studio that did this. Every single art director or the production designer would do one of these color script for their movie, and they each do it in such unique style. This one is for Finding Nemo. I think it's done with pastel. It's just this one long strip. There's no division between each shot, and you really see the progression of color and the mood change. So it's very helpful if you're making your short film and you want to visualize the climax, the ups and downs in your movie. A third of this book actually shows concept art. This book actually inspired me to use soft pastel and oil pastel. Just one of those books, like as an artist, you really want to collect. I'm going to talk about the final section that I want to recommend. This artist, Charles Harper, for over 60 years he painted in a style he referred to as minimal realism. Basically, he uses the minimal amount of lines to depict maximum amount of realism. Every line is necessary. There isn't one wasted line. There isn't one line that's just like randomly put there for no reason. Even the height of the lines, the alignment, they're all very well thought out. I think that's something as a designer I aspire to do, is to make calculated moves instead of just relying on randomness in Photoshop. I have two fashion books here that I haven't really even looked through completely yet. Fashion is something that I was very interested in when I was much younger. I love how they just used ink and paint. Yeah, I love this one. So good. But yeah, this one is pretty good. The fashion illustration, 1930 to 1970. Okay. Do you think I need to talk about this grandmaster here? So Kazuo Oga is one of the most iconic background painter and environment designer from Studio Ghibli. If you don't know what Studio Ghibli is, all I can tell you is if you are into 2D animation, that's the top tier quality stuff that you need to look at. And he was in charge of painting the forest in Totoro. Miyazaki was very impressed by his work immediately, and wow. Just look at this. Just look at this. So Miyazaki was very impressed by his work and how he painted the forest and how organic the trees looked. They didn't look overly rendered, but they still had the very realistic colors Miyazaki was looking for. So then he worked on various other films as background designer, and I think one for art direction. He worked on a more realistic film for art direction. If you are into background painting, this is definitely the guy to study. I remember my supervisor on my first project would just always show me his stuff and be like, you know, can you do the shadow like this? I'm like, okay, I'll try, but it's very hard. You will see some of these if you go to the Ghibli Museum in Tokyo, and it's even more amazing to look at in real life. My vocabulary is very limited, so this guy, Painting God, definitely get one of his books. So lastly, I'll just quickly talk about two illustrators that I really adored back in school. The first one is Sasek. He's from Europe. He is a very well-known illustrator in the children's book illustration world. He's famous for the series This Is Something Something, This Is Munich, or This Is New York. I was definitely inspired by his travel illustrations when I started drawing more architectural and travel drawings. You can see how he balances line with color very well. I think this is a really good example if you want to do pen drawing and do watercolor over top. So the second illustrator is another European illustrator called Kiraz. This is a great artist to look into if you like illustrating girls, because that's all he or she does. And very chic French girls. Just like really appealing designs, really attractive girls. Really simple shapes, nice patterns to balance it out, great colors, great pastel colors, but definitely not a lot of diversity in terms of girl design. It's just all the same type of girl. So I think that's it for all the books that I want to introduce to you guys today. Hopefully for anyone who is interested in studying animation or looking for books to buy, this video was somewhat helpful. I'll be listing all the books I've shown you guys today in the description box. You can probably find most of them in your local library as well, so that's a good way to, you know, really go through a lot of inspiration. So that's it for this video. I'll see you guys next time.